Welcome back to the deep dive. We constantly hear about today's billionaires, right? The figures are just astronomical. I
Absolutely.
mean, the top five richest people right now, their combined net worth is well over $1 trillion.
Staggering, yeah.
It really is. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? When you look back through history, are these modern tech and finance giants really the peak? Have they truly defined the absolute ceiling of human wealth?
That's exactly what we're digging into today. Because
That's
look, the big challenge with historical wealth is, comparing like a Roman gold coin to a modern stock portfolio. It doesn't really work.
right. Completely different worlds.
Totally. Currency values, inflation,
Yeah.
it gets messy fast.
Hmm.
So our mission here is to try and move beyond just like simple inflation adjustment.
Yeah.
We want to adjust these historical fortunes based on maybe a more reliable metric.
Huh.
What percentage of the global GDP did they actually control or effectively command?
Okay. So when we see a figure like, say, $561 billion for someone from the 19th century, how are historians getting to that? Is it really apples to apples?
Well, it's more like comparing apples to percentages of the global economic pie, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. The slice they controlled.
Exactly. We take the slice of the global economy they commanded then, and we sort of scale that slice to the size of the world's economy today.
And that changes things.
Of dramatically. It shows that the truly, truly wealthy people in history weren't just billionaires. They were people commanding entire states, vast resources, and often just an overwhelming share of the world's total output.
So we're definitely moving beyond like personal bank accounts here. We're talking state treasuries, command economies, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. We're going to look at basically three different types of wealth accumulation. You've got the industrial age fortunes, then sovereign wealth tied directly to empires, and finally, total state command, where the leader and the state's economy are almost indistinguishable.
Okay, so for you listening, get ready to maybe recalibrate what rich even means. How does that definition change when you go from managing, a personal stock portfolio to controlling maybe a third of the entire world's economic output? Let's unpack this, right? Let's set a baseline, a high bar maybe. Let's start with the giants who really represent the peak of private, non-royal wealth, the titans of the Gilded Age. Where do we begin? Rank 10.
Yeah, rank 10. That takes us to John D. Rockefeller, the founder of Standard Oil back in 1870.
The oil guy. Everyone knows the name.
Exactly. And through some pretty aggressive tactics, let's be honest, he built a monopoly controlling something like 90% of America's entire oil industry. He was the world's first official billionaire.
90%. And when we do that adjustment you mentioned based on his share of the U.S. economy back then, what does his fortune look like today?
His peak wealth gets estimated at around $561 billion in today's money.
Okay, $561 billion, that definitely beats today's richest, but
But, and this is the key point, his wealth, huge as it was still operating within the bounds of private law, market forces,
right, he could be sued, regulated eventually.
precisely. Still, his legacy is immense. He gave away vast sums, founding the University of Chicago, the Rockefeller Foundation, things that are still huge today.
But even Rockefeller at $561 billion wasn't the absolute richest industrialist by this measure. Rank 9 goes to Andrew Carnegie, right?
That's right, Carnegie. He basically transformed the U.S. steel industry, sold Carnegie Steel to J.P. Morgan, I think it was 1901.
And his number.
His peak is estimated higher, around $667 billion today. But maybe more importantly, at his peak, he controlled over 2% of the entire U.S. economy.
2% of the whole American economy, just through making steel, essentially. It feels almost basic compared to how finance works now.
It kind of does, yeah.
Yeah.
Raw production power. And like Rockefeller, he was big on philanthropy, that whole gospel of wealth idea.
Well, didn't he give away most of it?
He did, yeah. Donated roughly 90% of his fortune by the end, funded thousands of public libraries, Carnegie Hall, institutions like that.
So the big takeaway here seems to be that even the richest American ever, when you adjust for economic share, doesn't actually break the $1 trillion mark.
Exactly. That seems to be the ceiling for wealth accumulated within a, let's say, relatively modern private enterprise system.
Okay, so that sets the stage. To get into those really mind-bending trillion-plus numbers, we have to ask, what happens when those limits, the laws, the market constraints, what happens when they just sort of disappear?
Well, that's when you transition into sovereign wealth. We're talking about rulers who didn't really need a bank account because they were the state treasury.
Okay, who's first?
This brings us to rank 8, Catherine the Great of Russia.
Catherine ruled from, 1762 to 1796, expanded the empire, known for modernizing things.
That's her. And her wealth wasn't just gold bars, it was land, resources, millions of serfs.
So how do you calculate that?
It's about effective control. Historians estimate her effective wealth equates to around $1.5 trillion today.
Okay, trillion with a T. We've crossed the threshold.
We have. And that's based on her absolute control over huge imperial estates, Russia's vast natural resources, and, crucially, the power to tax millions of people directly.
And she used it.
Oh, yeah. She funneled a lot of that into art, science, education,
Right.
building up Russia's status as a major European power, intellectually as well as militarily.
Right. That's a significant jump from Carnegie. But $1.5 trillion is still somehow going to be dwarfed, isn't it? Our next ruler, Augustus Caesar, ranks 7. This is where the numbers get really wild.
Augustus is, yeah, it's a whole different level. The first Roman emperor, the Pax Romana era, historians estimate his empire controlled almost a third of the entire world's economic output at that time.
Wait. A third of the whole planet's economy.
A third. Just wrap your head around that for a second.
Okay, so what does that look like in today's terms?
When you convert that share of global GDP, his personal wealth, or the wealth he commanded, amounts to roughly $5.8 trillion.
$5.8 trillion.
To try and put that in perspective, that share of the global economy, it's like controlling the entire current GDP of, say, Germany, France, and the UK combined today.
Wow. And how did he consolidate that kind of power and wealth?
Well, military might was key, obviously, but a major move was seizing Egypt, which was incredibly wealthy, and basically claiming it as his personal property.
His personal piggy bank.
Pretty much. That's wealth defined by pure political and military power, not by, selling things in a market.
Okay, now we're getting into the truly extreme territory. We've seen industrial wealth, imperial wealth through conquests like Augustus, through state control like Catherine. But rank 6, Joseph Stalin, this feels like a totally different category again.
It really is the ultimate shift in definition, I think. Stalin ruled the Soviet Union until '53. His wealth wasn't private, wasn't even imperial in the old sense. It was capacity, pure command.
Explain that. How do you put a number on command?
Well, his fortune, if you can call it that, is based on his total control over the Soviet state economy. And that economy, at its peak under him, produced nearly 10% of the entire world's GDP.
10% of global output.
Yeah. And if you translate that share into today's economic scale, it represents something like $11 trillion.
11 trillion. Okay, I have to push back a bit here. If Stalin himself lived relatively plainly, simple clothes, didn't have palaces dripping in gold, and he couldn't just go spend that $11 trillion personally, is that really wealth in the same way we talked about Rockefeller? Doesn't it break the definition?
It absolutely breaks the old definition.
Yeah.
And that's the fascinating part, the contradiction. Stalin's power wasn't about personal consumption. It was administrative, bureaucratic power. That $11 trillion represents his ability to direct all the resources, all the labor of a massive nation towards whatever goal he decided.
So it's about the power to do things on a massive scale, not the power to buy things.
Exactly. It highlights this fundamental difference. Industrial wealth is maybe about maximizing personal consumption or accumulation. Command wealth, like Stalin's, is about maximizing centralized power, regardless of the leader's personal lifestyle. Power over consumption.
Power without the need for consumption. Okay, that sets a fascinating context for the massive empires that follow, especially those in Asia, which for centuries were the economic powerhouses of the world, right?
Absolutely. For a long time, Asia dominated global economic output. So let's turn back there. We can start with Empress Wu-Zetian, who comes in at rank 5. She ruled China during the Tang, and later her own Zhou dynasty. A period known for the thriving Silk Road trade, strong agriculture.
An efficient government, I imagine, to manage all that.
Very efficient. Her effective control over resources equates to around $25 trillion in today's terms. An absolutely enormous economic engine.
25 trillion. And how did she manage that level of efficiency?
Well, the sources suggest something interesting. She apparently really disliked nepotism. Yeah, she actively pushed for meritocracy, promoting competent administrators, often from lower backgrounds, instead of just relying on family connections.
So a well-run machine.
Exactly. A state machine that was highly effective at collecting taxes, managing trade routes like the Silk Road, and that generated this immense financial capacity.
Okay, moving up the ranks again. Rank 4 takes us to India, to Akbar I, the third emperor of the Mughal Empire.
Right. Akbar the Great. His reign from 1556 to 1605 is often seen as a golden age. culturally brilliant, militarily strong.
And economically.
Immense. His empire represented nearly a quarter of the entire global GDP during his rule.
A quarter of the world's economy. What does that translate to?
The estimate puts his effective wealth, the resources he commanded, at around $30 trillion.
$30 trillion. Where did that come from?
Primarily agriculture, which was incredibly productive, combined with very efficient taxation systems and massive global trade, especially in textiles and spices. India was a huge exporter.
And like Catherine or Wuzesh, how did he use that wealth?
Akbar was known for funneling it into incredible, monumental architecture, think Fatehpur Sikri, but also, significantly, into promoting religious tolerance and funding public works, that creating stability, which in turn helped maintain that huge economic share.
So stability and efficient administration keep coming up as key drivers?
Definitely.
Okay, so if controlling a quarter of global GDP gets you $30 trillion, what happens when you control even more? Rank 3 is Emperor Shenzong of Song China.
Shenzong.
Yeah.
Ruled from 1067 to 1085. Song China during this period was just technologically and commercially way ahead of most of the world.
Yeah.
So advanced.
His era was even called peaceful prosperity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And under Shenzong, the Song dynasty accounted for, well, estimates vary, but consistently more than a third of global GDP. Some say up to 35–40%.
More than a third. So the number must be astronomical.
It is. Translated into today's terms, that level of control equates to an estimated $44.5 trillion.
$44.5 trillion. It's
Yeah.
almost hard to comprehend that figure.
It really is.
Yeah.
And again, similar to Akbar, Shenzong used that immense fortune not just on imperial grandeur, but on state progress. He implemented the famous new policies, which aimed at social welfare, poverty relief, stabilizing crises, using the state's wealth for broad economic management.
It's fascinating that the highest quantifiable wealth figures we're seeing often come from these periods of, yes, immense imperial power, but also relative peace, stability, and highly advanced administration.
Absolutely. The ability to manage huge territories, complex trade networks, and efficient taxation systems without constant major warfare or internal collapse seems to be the real engine behind dominating the global economy historically.
Okay, so we've reached these staggering multi-trillion-dollar figures based on GDP share. Now we get to the very top, the apex, rank 2 and rank 1. These are individuals whose wealth seems to almost break the system of accounting itself. Let's start with rank 2, Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan, founder of the Mongol Empire, he built the largest contiguous land empire in all of history, over 5 million square miles.
Just the sheer scale is unbelievable.
It is. And because of that sheer scale, the theoretical value of the land, resources, and populations he conquered and controlled, well, if you try to put a modern number on it, it comes out to something like $120 trillion.
$120 trillion.
An almost nonsensical number based purely on the territory controlled.
But here's the huge paradox with Genghis Khan, right? He didn't actually hoard riches in the way we think of wealth.
Not at all. That's the key contradiction. Despite commanding this empire with potentially $120 trillion worth of assets, Genghis Khan himself reportedly lived a relatively simple life by ruler standards. He actively distributed spoils of war among his soldiers and commanders. His personal treasury was said to be quite modest.
So his power wasn't measured in gold sitting in a vault.
No, it was measured in military dominance, loyalty, organizational genius, and the sheer reach of his empire.
And speaking of reach, there's that incredible fact about his genetic legacy.
Ah, yes. That 2003 study. It suggested that traces of his Y chromosome might still be present in as many as 16 million men across Asia today.
16 million descendants. That's a different kind of power, a biological footprint that lasts for centuries. It completely reframes legacy, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It transcends finance entirely. But for the title of the single richest person who ever lived, the one whose wealth is often deemed truly incalculable, we have to go to rank 1. Mansa Musa.
Mansa Musa, the Sultan of Mali in West Africa, ruling from around 1312 to 1337. His kingdom controlled probably the world's richest gold reserves at the time.
Exactly. Gold was pouring out of West Africa, and he controlled the source. Historians often just give up trying to put a number on his wealth. They call it incalculable, indescribable.
But there is evidence of the scale, even if it's anecdotal. The famous pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324.
And that's the defining story, yes. He traveled with an enormous entourage, tens of thousands of soldiers, civilian slaves, and crucially, hundreds of camels, each reportedly carrying hundreds of pounds of gold dust.
Just imagine that procession.
And as he traveled, particularly through Cairo in Egypt, He spent and gave away gold, so lavishly building mosques, giving to the poor, buying souvenirs, that he completely flooded the market.
Flooded the
He
market.
introduced so much gold into the Egyptian economy so quickly that the value of gold itself plummeted. It apparently caused an economic crisis, hyperinflation, that took Cairo's markets over a decade to recover from.
He single-handedly devalued the currency of an entire major nation just by being generous on his holiday trip.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That act alone demonstrates a level of personal wealth relative to the world around him that is just almost impossible for us to equate to anything today. He controlled maybe nearly half the entire known world supply of gold at that moment.
Half the world's gold, okay. Incalculable seems about right.
It really secured his legacy. There's simply no modern comparison for that level of resource domination by one individual.
Wow. Okay, so we've gone from Gilded Age industrialists to Roman emperors, Soviet dictators, Chinese empresses, Mughal rulers, Mongol conquerors, and finally, the Gold King of Mali. If we try to pull all this together, what's the big takeaway for someone listening?
I think the key thing really is that historical wealth, especially at these extreme levels, is fundamentally different from how we usually think about modern wealth. It's much less about, stock portfolios or market capitalization,
Yeah.
and far more about controlling these massive percentages of the world's actual productive capacity or its key resources. We saw that journey, right, from Carnegie's 2% of just the U.S. economy
Yeah.
to figures like Emperor Shenzong or Augustus Caesar commanding maybe a third of global GDP, all the way to Stalin's total state command representing 10% of global output, or Mansa Musa just cornering the market on the world's most valuable commodity.
It really makes you rethink what power actually means, doesn't it? Like, what's ultimately more impactful? Is it the finite recorded wealth, like Rockefellers or Carnegie's, which maybe gets funneled into building universities and libraries that last centuries?
The philanthropic legacy.
Yeah. Or is it that theoretical, almost unquantifiable command of resources that results in something like Genghis Khan's staggering biological legacy, leaving his DNA across continents?
It's a profound question. And the sources we've looked at, they really suggest that the ultimate legacy of immense wealth isn't always measured in dollars or gold bars kept in a vault.
So that final provocative thought for you listening. Does the ability to crash an entire nation's economy just by spending money, like Mansa Musa did in Egypt,
Or to leave your genetic footprint in 16 million people centuries later, like Genghis Khan.
does that demonstrate a deeper, maybe more enduring form of power than simply being a billionaire in today's terms?
That's really the question to chew on, isn't it? What's the difference between just accumulating vast wealth and truly commanding a civilization, or even reshaping demography itself?
An absolutely incredible deep dive into wealth, power, command, and legacy across thousands of years. Thank you so much for guiding us through those mind-bending fortunes.